Today, we're unpacking Wilhelm Liebknecht's fiery 1899 pamphlet, No Compromise. We're going to look closely at a text that completely shaped the tactical debates of early European socialism. Whether you're a political history buff or just kind of fascinated by the nuts and bolts of how ideological movements actually operate, this text is essentially a masterclass in the arguments for absolute party purity. We'll be walking through this impartially, breaking down exactly how Liebknecht constructs his case against making any deals with the political establishment. So here is the core dilemma. Is political compromise a necessary evil or a fatal poison? Liebknecht builds his entire argument around this exact question, and he is vehement that for a socialist movement, political compromise isn't just distasteful, it is an absolute fatal poison. Now, in modern politics, we usually think of compromise as, well, how things get done, right? The bedrock of governance. But Liebknecht takes a radically different stance here. He argues that if a movement is trying to fundamentally change society, stepping into the arena of spoils politics doesn't advance the cause at all. In fact, it destroys it from the inside out. Section 1. The Spark of Controversy. Get this. Liebknecht was actually so riled up by what was happening in his party that he wrote this entire pamphlet while on summer vacation. He was watching the German Social Democratic Party rapidly shift its rules, constantly wavering over whether to participate in the heavily rigged Prussian legislative elections. Back in 1893, they had a rock-solid rule: total abstention. They figured the voting system was designed to lock out democratic thought anyway, so why play a rigged game? But then, by 1897 in Hamburg, they softened that stance. They allowed participation but strictly forbade any alliances. Fast forward just one more year to Stuttgart, and they pass an emergency resolution leaving the choice up to local districts. For Liebknecht, this timeline wasn't showing strategic flexibility. It was a massive, dangerous wavering of core principles. According to the text, the ultimate tipping point, the straw that broke the camel's back, was something called the Bavarian Cow Trade. This was a highly controversial political alliance that Liebknecht saw as the dangerous thin end of an opportunist wedge. Down in Bavaria, local social democratic leaders had actually entered into a formal, structured election alliance with the clerical Center Party. To Liebknecht, this was just a jaw-dropping betrayal. We aren't talking about individuals quietly voting strategically. This was a formal pact with a party he saw as representing completely opposing class interests. He derisively called it a cow trade, which is basically what we'd call political log rolling or backroom dealing today. Section 2. The Class Struggle Foundation. To really grasp why this cow trade offended him so deeply, we have to look at his baseline definition of the movement. Liebknecht makes a really sharp distinction between his politics and general humanitarianism. For him, the movement isn't just about wishing for a better world. It's a structural necessity born directly from the specific economic antagonisms of capitalism. So the class struggle isn't just some tactic you can turn on and off when it's convenient. It is the absolute, non-negotiable precondition for the party even existing. He puts it bluntly. Whoever conceives of socialism in the sense of a sentimental, philanthropic striving after human equality is no socialist. This brilliantly illustrates his hardline stance. Simply feeling pity for poverty or wanting equality doesn't make someone a socialist in his militant definition. He points out that, pity for the poor exists in Christianity and plenty of other philosophies. But he argues that without recognizing those underlying class antagonisms, you're just engaging in sentimental philanthropy. Strip away the militant class struggle, and sure, you might have a nice charity movement, but you absolutely do not have the party as he defined it. Section 3. The German Bourgeoisie. Now, Liebknecht draws a really sharp and honestly pretty harsh contrast here between the English and French middle classes and the German bourgeoisie, who he views as historically impotent. According to the pamphlet, in England and France, the bourgeoisie actually fought for and won their political liberty. They cleared away the old medieval systems. But over in Germany, because economic development happened later and in a totally different way, the bourgeoisie never had that triumphant liberal stage. Instead, they stayed politically weak, constantly leaning on a militaristic, landlord-dominated state just to protect their own interests. He points directly to the frantic year of 1848 to prove this. This was a moment where the German bourgeoisie briefly flirted with freedom, before bowing right back under the reactionary yoke out of sheer terror of the laborers. When a premature proletarian movement broke out, the German bourgeoisie panicked. Instead of pushing forward for true democracy, they ran sprinting back to the safety of the conservative state. Because of this historical cowardice, Liebknecht argues there is simply no way the working class can rely on them for democratic alliances. In his eyes, allying with them is like allying with a political corpse. Section 4. The Inclined Plane. The text uses this fantastic, vivid metaphor of an inclined plane to warn how even minor compromises inevitably drag a movement down to rock bottom. Today, we'd probably just call this a slippery slope. Liebknecht emphatically warns his readers, the very second you tell your supporters that it's suddenly okay to form an alliance with the exact people you've been fighting against, you completely wipe away the boundary line that gives your movement its identity. Once that line is blurred, there's absolutely no logical stopping point. The concessions will just keep coming. And the ultimate consequence of this slippery slope? It alienates the weary masses who are looking to the party as their one distinct alternative to the ruling system. Think about it from the perspective of an everyday disillusioned citizen. They flock to the party because it promises a total, clean break from the injustices they face daily. If that same party suddenly starts shaking hands and making backroom deals with the politicians representing that very system, what happens? The masses get totally demoralized. The party loses its drawing power. Liebknecht asserts that the movement's power relies 100% on the masses believing they are a wholly unique, uncompromising alternative. Section 5. The Millerand Warning. To prove his point about just how catastrophic opportunism can be, Liebknecht points to a real-time crisis that was unfolding in France, the Millerand disaster. Alexander Millerand, a prominent socialist, actually joined a bourgeois government cabinet. But it wasn't just any cabinet. He ended up sitting right next to General Galliffet, the man literally known as the Butcher for violently suppressing the Paris Commune. For Liebknecht, this was the ultimate tragic proof of his inclined plane theory. By entering the government in the name of being pragmatic, Millerand ended up validating and cooperating with the actual murderers of his own movement. He writes, a socialist who goes into a bourgeois government either goes over to the enemy or else puts himself in the power of the enemy. He's asserting that a non-capitalist government is an impossibility in current society, meaning any socialist who participates in one effectively disarms their own movement. They become like a hostage in a battle. By joining the cabinet, Millerand couldn't actually implement his own policies. He just became a human shield. Because if the opposition tried to attack the government, they'd essentially be attacking one of their own. It's a brilliant, deadly tactical trap, and Liebknecht uses it as a massive warning sign for his German comrades. Section 6. A Peculiar People. In the final section, he uses this incredibly powerful metaphor of Samson's hair to drive his point home. He says that ideological purity and the refusal to assimilate is the only source of their immense power. Just like Samson lost all his superhuman strength the moment his hair was cut by Delilah, Liebknecht argues the party will lose its avalanche-like political momentum if it allows opposing parties, who he wonderfully calls the bourgeois Delilahs, to flatter them into alliances. What makes them strong isn't the number of legislative seats they hold, it's the spotless integrity of their opposition. But look, he wasn't saying they should just hide their heads in the sand. He believed the party could and should ruthlessly exploit divisions among its opponents on a tactical level. It just must never formally obligate itself to them. He says it's perfectly fine to vote tactically in a runoff election if it means defeating a more dangerous opponent, or to exploit the quarrels between other parties. That's just smart fighting. But the hard line is drawn at formal treaties. You can walk the same path as another party for a brief moment if it suits your goals, sure, but you must keep your hands free and never sign a binding alliance. And the pamphlet leaves us with this really provocative dilemma. Can a movement conquer the world if it ceases to believe in itself alone? Liebknecht wraps up by comparing his movement to early, uncompromising religions. He firmly believes that the moment a revolutionary idea tries to blend in with the establishment it's trying to replace, its conquering power simply vanishes. Whether you agree with his strict militancy or you just view it as sheer political stubbornness, Wilhelm Liebknecht's no compromise provides a fascinating, crystal clear argument for the sheer power of ideological purity. It forces us to ask, in the pursuit of immense change, is compromise the realistic way forward, or is it the ultimate trap?